Welcome to the Little Bytes of Maine, or perhaps Oregon. What if I told you we were still on Manhattan, less than 30 minutes by subway from Rockefeller Center and Times Square? This is the Hudson River, and we're still on the very tiny island with its 1.6 million residents and many, many visitors. This tour is of the neighborhood recently named Hudson Heights. Now, it's part of Washington Heights, the part that was actually home to the fort that gave Washington Heights its name. But real estate brokers prefer to distinguish this part from the rest of Washington Heights, hence the name Hudson Heights. I'm talking about the neighborhood on the western ridge between 181st and Fort Tryon Park, roughly the neighborhood between the George Washington Bridge and the Cloisters Museum. Or to be more exact, from this rock where I sometimes read to a tree in Fort Tryon Park where I sometimes read. Oh, and speaking of real estate brokers, it's Berta Gilly. Hi Berta.
Robert! Hi! Robert! There are no apartments down here.
Yeah.
I wanted to show you all some
Oh, maybe I didn't properly explain. We're giving a tour of Hudson Heights. Okay, we're starting down here in the woods to talk about the George Washington Bridge. The George Washington Bridge is the only bridge that connects Manhattan to the state of New Jersey.
All the apartments in Hudson Heights have views of the George Washington Bridge.
That's not true. Mine faces east. Let's not lie. Let's go, everybody. Let me talk to you for a second. Okay, it's not about selling apartments.
They seem like such a nice group of people.
Yeah, but this is actually a tour.
All the new residents. That's right. That's what I'm saying. George Washington Bridge is the longest suspension bridge in the world.
That's not true. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world when it opened in 1931, but it was surpassed by the Golden Gate and our own Verrazano, which is the longest in the US. The longest suspension bridge in the world is in Japan, and it's almost twice as long as a GW.
The GW is the busiest bridge in the world.
That might be true with vehicles. It is, without a doubt, the busiest crossing, bridge, or tunnel in all of New York.
1 billion cars every day.
320,000 vehicles every day.
But $1 billion in tolls.
A million in tolls.
That's still impressive.
Yes, it is. That's why we don't need to lie. 320,000 vehicles every day and $1 million in daily tolls. This is New York. We don't need to exaggerate.
It's the only double-deck suspension bridge in the world.
Again, not true. The Verrazano has 2 decks. It was the first double-deck suspension bridge in the world. In 1962, they added 6 lanes of that lower deck to the upper deck's 8. I believe it's the only 14-lane suspension bridge in the world.
The only 14-lane suspension bridge in the world.
A funny story. Because they built the lower deck from below the George Washington span, people in the neighborhood called the lower deck the Martha Washington. You get it?
But all those perverts are long dead.
Probably not. 1960s.
Le Corbusier, a very famous Frenchman.
Swiss. He was a Swiss architect and urban theorist, everybody.
Well, he called it the best bridge and the greatest piece of architecture I've seen in my entire frickin' life.
Huh, I never read that, but he called it the only seat of grace in this disordered city, largely because of the exposed steel, which was almost covered up. Cass Gilbert, architect of the Woolworth Building, had designed a granite structure to conceal these vertical towers. It would have resembled the Brooklyn Bridge, with steel cables hung between stone towers. But it was the Depression, and the Port Authority had just acquired the Holland Tunnel and was short of cash. They decided to keep the bridge the way it was, figuring it was cheaper to paint the steel than to add the tons of stone. So it was a happy accident that it became a place where, Corbusier again, steel architecture seemed to laugh. And speaking of laughter, here's some funny trivia about opening day in 1931. Let me take you back. I have to change hats.
Oh my God! What the?
On the first day, 100,000 pedestrians crossed the bridge, including a man on horseback and 2 boys on roller skates from the Bronx, who were the first to cross. Just a bit of trivia. Also, 56,000 vehicles cross, most from the Manhattan side.
Where did all the purple go?
The approach on the New Jersey side wasn't completed by the opening of the bridge, and the country roads over there were tricky. So drivers who had crossed the river by boat or through the Holland Tunnel couldn't find the George Washington Bridge, couldn't find the bridge which at the time was the longest suspension bridge in the world, and so sadly they had to return by boat or through the Holland Tunnel. Now, let's explore Washington Heights.
Take off the hat! Thank you! And it's Hudson Heights! Hudson Heights! Hudson Heights!